Okay, you ready for me to start?
Couple more minutes.
Oh, okay.
Cheryl, were you needing to share your screen and were you showing slides? I can't remember.
No, I'm not going to.
Okay. Okay.
That is a recipe for disaster on my side.
Understood. It's good to know your limitations.
During Fringe live streams, I rely on the interns to handle all the technology. If something will go wrong with me, can go wrong, it will go wrong.
Fair enough. Looks like we have one more minute. I'm going to start the recording, Craig, and then you can start. Hold on a sec. Okay.
All right. Thank you for joining us here today. We have Cheryl Kimmi with us, and we're going to be talking about the arts. And Cheryl was a college music major, and the arts became an avocation of Cheryl's about 20 years ago. Before that, she spent around 20 years in sales and marketing in the corporate world. And she had an opportunity at the Heart of America Shakespeare Festival. She took an arts position with that, which then led to her first additional arts position, where she served as coordinator of Arts Alive and the program manager of Samalan Arts in Youth Development, and board member of Barn Players and Just Off Broadway Theater. Cheryl's passion for the arts and local artists eventually led her to be the founder, organized the Fringe Festival here in Kansas City. And Cheryl is going to talk about what the Fringe Festival is. And then she's going to talk about what is the impact of the arts on the community. And from the other direction, what influence does the community have on the arts? So welcome, Cheryl.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, All Souls, for having me today. Craig's been a longtime Fringe volunteer, so he knows that I can talk endlessly. So I will try to be cognizant of the clock today and get through the overview, so we'll have time for questions. Fringe is quite a beast, actually. It encompasses so much. So I want to go back. I want to start at the very beginning of what Fringe is, because Fringe is not unique to Kansas City. Fringe erupted spontaneously in 1947 in Edinburgh, Scotland. Edinburgh was doing an arts festival to reunite Europe after World War II, and they did not invite 7 or 8 local artists because they weren't traditional. So those artists said, fine, we'll do our own thing. And they set up stages on the perimeter of the festival. A reporter said, there are far more interesting things happening on the Fringe, and the Fringe was born. The Edinburgh Fringe is the single largest arts festival in the world. It runs, well, pre-COVID, it ran 24/7 for the entire month of August. And there's so much that happens, and I'll get more into that. But then Fringe spread across Europe. It spread to Southeast Asia, then to New Zealand and Australia, and then from Australia to Canada, and swept Canada before then it hit the US. And the first Fringe in the US was actually the Orlando Fringe in 1992, in April of 92. Fringe hit the US, and it has grown since. So in 2004, I approached the Arts Council. Back up to Craig told you that I left corporate America in 2001 and started working in the arts. And as I was working at the Shakespeare Festival and just off Broadway, and I saw all of our young local artists leaving town. Had such incredible talent, but there weren't opportunities here for them. There was only the majors pretty much at that point in time. Now, Unicorn was the exception, the Unicorn Theater. And then there was also a couple of pockets of community theaters that provided opportunities, but they weren't paid opportunities. They were community theater. And so I was going, whoa, we're losing all this talent. What's going on? And many of my theater friends told me about Fringe festivals. And I'm like, well, and said, we need a Fringe festival in Kansas City. I said, well, why doesn't somebody start it? And there was never any answer. So I went to the Arts Council. And some of you may know Joan Israelite, who was the founder of the Metropolitan Arts Council, now known as Arts KC. And I teased her for years that she pushed me off the cliff. She actually had a relative that was board of the Minnesota Fringe, which at the time was one of the leading fringes in the US. So she hooked me up with her cousin or uncle, I forget now, but went to Minnesota Fringe in August of 2004 and checked out that Fringe, talked to artists, talked to audience, talked to board members, talked to volunteers, talked to staff, trying to get a full picture of what this animal Fringe is, and is it feasible to do in Kansas City? And came back going, yeah, Kansas City can do this. And I at the time was on the board of Just Off Broadway, so reached out to my peers with Just Off Broadway, and then also the Crossroads Community Association. And we were starting conversations and talking about what's possible and what's not, when I got a call from Joan Israelite at the Arts Council saying, Cheryl, are you available next Thursday? And with Joan, you make yourself available. She had a meeting at the downtown library. It had just opened, the new downtown library. And they were talking about doing a kids Fringe, which Joan knew was in our overall projections of what we wanted to do, a regular Fringe and a youth Fringe. And so I met with the library, and we were on parallel paths, and we decided at that point to join forces and move forward. Then the debate came. That was the fall of 2004. And the library was wanting to do something in the summer of 2005. It's like, oh my gosh, this is a really short window to try to accomplish something. So we held a couple of all calls to artists in January and February with 3 questions. Is Kansas City ready for a Fringe? Would you participate? And should we try to throw something together for 2005 or launch in 2006? It was overwhelming. Yes, why wait? So we threw up, well, whatever, got a website with applications up by March 1st and said by May 1st, if we have 30 applicants, we'll move forward and do this. We were shooting for a 3-day event in July. Well, by May 1st, we had 54 applicants and stupidly took all 54 and made it happen. We did a 3-day event in July by the seat of our pants and pulled it off. Excuse me. So then it just grew. and grew and grew. It was all volunteer. We were all volunteers, and everybody loved what was happening. It was interesting, all unjuried, all uncensored. It was first come, first serve, and it still is. As we did surveys each year, we surveyed the audience and got their feedback. We surveyed the artists and got their feedback. And the first couple of years, the artists were like, well, we need edgier stuff. And I said, then bring it. So it took the artists a while to wrap their head around, this wasn't censored. They had a free voice in this. And then they stepped up and started bringing what they wanted to bring to the festival, not what they thought people wanted to see. So festival grew and grew and grew. 19 was the last in-person festival. That was year 15. And we had grown from a 3-day event to a 2-week event. Then COVID hit and everything went out the window. For those who were on earlier, before we started live streaming, I was asked if I was going to share anything on screen. I went, no, that's out of my technical capabilities. Not in my comfort zone. And thankfully, interns and Fringe interns from previous years came back to the table and said, hey, we want to help keep Fringe moving. So I was on tons of calls in the spring of 20 with U.S. Association of Fringe Festivals and World Fringe Association, and everybody's talking about all these different platforms and how to do live streams. And I was taking notes fast and furiously, hearing these words, but not able to wrap my head around how to do this. So I went back to all of our volunteer staff and our interns and said, guys, I know we need to do this, but I can't figure this out. And the young one said, no problem, we'll research this. We'll come back and tell you which is the best platform and what's most feasible for our organization. And they did. And they made Virtual Fringe happen in 20 and 21. So we were able to provide an opportunity for artists to continue to create, which many loved because all other creative outlets had pretty much shut down at that point. Some were tech savvy enough to do their own stuff online, but many were not. And so we adapted. That first year, people figured it out. The quality of what we shared online was sometimes questionable, but at least we had something. And then last year, we shifted gears and we brought in local filmmakers to advise and guide artists on best practices. And the quality level jumped dramatically. So artists are learning new skill sets. And we've also determined that in the midst of all of this, my philosophy is always turn lemons into lemonade. There's something to be learned from everything. That during Fringe, live Fringe, it is absolutely impossible to see everything that Fringe provides. There just simply aren't enough hours in the weeks and show slots available to see everything that is being presented. So it's like, okay, so as we move forward, then we're going to go, hopefully in 22, we'll be back to a live in-person festival, but we will then be recording live, because for many of the artists, just doing a recording in an empty studio or in your living room, you don't get that audience feedback, which so many shows depend on. But we will, so the goal is to record everything professionally live during the festival. And then once the festival closes, then do a couple of weeks of live streaming. So people can see shows that they missed or see shows that they want to see again, and provide even more opportunities. And for those who are not comfortable coming out, can see shows. And it also expands our audience and artist opportunities, both nationally and internationally. And that is another point, that this is not just a local festival. We have artists and have had artists for years, even since the beginning, since year one, regional, and then we grew into national. And for the last 10 years, we've had international participants in the KC Fringe Festival. So, Craig, make notes of the things that I'm jumping over because there's so much to share. There's no way I can touch on everything. But Fringe, I learned early on, people didn't have a good grasp of what Fringe were. There were many that thought, oh, it's just community theater, and dismissed a lot of it. So I learned when I spoke in front of folks to do a little Q&A. And oh, let's see, I can't see anybody's faces, but I'll just go ahead and ask questions. How many, and this will be rhetorical because I can't see you, but how many people have seen Stomp? It's made multiple tours of the US. In '94, they received both Obie Awards and Drama Desk Awards. Then in 2002, the award-winning Tony Best Musical was Urinetown on Broadway. And then that Urinetown has been through here a couple of times on a couple of national tours. Then in 2006, A Drowsy Chaperone, huge hit on Broadway, won the 2006 Tony Best Musical and has had multiple national tours and been through Kansas City at least once. Oh, shifting gears, A King's Speech, 2011 Academy Award winning Best Picture. And then currently on Broadway, huge global sensation, new musical called Six. It's about 6 of King Henry's wives. And if you watch the Thanksgiving Day parade, you saw a snippet of it on the Macy's parade on Thursday. And what do all of those have in common? They all premiered at a Fringe festival. So Fringes are an amazing creative landscape. It fills the bill for so many different things. It's for first-time artists who are trying their hand at producing for the very first time. It's also for established artists who have a new idea that they want to test and develop. Many of you may realize, but not everybody realizes, that Broadway shows don't start on Broadway. They start in other places. They start at Fringe festivals. They start at local theaters and develop and get feedback and tweak and grow. And the goal is to eventually land on Broadway. So many of our local artists that participate have a goal of hitting Broadway. And many of our folks from the KC Fringe, local folks, have taken their Fringe shows and gone on to regional tours, to big national festivals. In 19, a show that premiered in KC Fringe in 18 went on to the New York International Musical Theater Festival and took Best of Show. So we have a lot of talent here in town, and Fringe provides a platform for them to learn and grow and develop their product. And I'm sure you may have a question, so I will wait for questions to expand more upon that, because I do want to address the question about how arts impact the community and the community impacts artists. And I can only relate from my perspective that for me, when we give artists the opportunity to share their voice openly and freely, we can learn so much through theater, especially. They can convey messages and give perspectives on things that I may not know, I may not have any experience with, you may not know, and thereby opening people's hearts and minds to new ideas and new concepts. And then the community, I mean, the community reaction to this last year's fringe shows were all pretty dark, which is reflecting what's happening in our community. Things have been dark with COVID, and you can take that meaning in multiple ways. That these have been challenging times, and the artists are then reflecting these times in the work that they produce. And so it goes hand in hand. What's happening affects the artist's creativity, and then the artist's creativity, their message, can impact the community and how they respond to those situations. Let me grab a drink real fast. So in being cognizant of my time, it's supposed to be about 20 minutes, folks. Is that right, Craig? Renee? Okay.
You can go up to 30 minutes is okay.
Oh, all right. Well, you know I can talk nonstop for an hour. So I want to dive in a little more on how Fringe works here, because Fringe is a little different in every part of the world. And here in the U.S., each U.S. Fringe, and when I started KC Fringe in 2005, there were 15, 16 fringes. And there were 4 of us launching in 2005. And now in the US, there are over 40 US fringes. And everybody has a little bit different approach. Some are totally theater festivals. Some have different variations. Here in Kansas City, we have performing arts. We have visual arts. We have a film component, which bridges those gaps, film and media, mixed media. Then we also have a youth component and a teen component. And the library, I'd mentioned early on that we partnered with the library. The library, Kansas City Public Library, since day one, has been the sponsor of our Youth Fringe component. And then we developed a partnership, multiple partnerships with both young audiences and with the Coterie for our Teen Fringe component. And the concept is to provide a platform for teens to create their own work. With Coterie, we do a playwright workshop the last weekend of Fringe and make it accessible. It's $10 for kids to participate. And if they don't have the funds, then we have a scholarship fund to support that. And then through that, they can find out if they like writing and playwriting, and then have the opportunity to participate in the Coterie's Young Playwright Spring Workshops that happen every year. And we're working with them to develop a mentorship program to then develop those plays and produce them in the Fringe. And then we work with young audiences to provide a stage for all teen artists that want to produce and perform, and provide folks there that guide them through all the steps. And we guide our regular Fringe artists. We provide workshops how to produce. We lay it all out for folks that have never produced before and what to do. And Fringe is actually the best deal in town. They pay to play. They pay to participate, because otherwise you get up to the end, to opening date, and they're like, oh, I'm not ready, and bail. But if they have an investment, they will follow through 99% of the time and make it happen. So they pay a nominal fee. For a small venue, they pay $300 and get 5 performances. We provide the venue. We provide limited technology, light and sound. We have a technician that runs their light and sound, and it has to be pretty basic, nothing complicated. We provide all the front of house. We provide all the ticketing. We provide ushers. We provide all of the bookkeeping on the back end to track all the ticket sales and their proceeds. And we share proceeds. Artists get 70% of the ticket sales, and the venue who hosts them gets 30% of the ticket sales. And then provide promotion of the festival overall. And then do workshops with them on how to promote their individual shows. So we try to provide all the support and background that they need. Many take full advantage of what we provide. others do not. And they learn that it makes a difference in their ultimate sales. And so then the goal is to help them then produce on Beyond Fringe on their own. So we've got a lot of things have developed now. There are more theaters, more local theaters that have opened up, and we have several local playwriting group organizations that support each other and work together to develop shows, not just for Fringe, but in general. And we feel like we support the arts community as a whole. And we now participate also. Many of the major arts organizations are partners with us. The Rep hosted us several years for opening show, and we've had several folks from the Rep produce shows in the Fringe over the years. The ballet is now a regular venue for us. The Unicorn Theater is a regular venue for us. The Lyric Opera has been a venue for us and participated with us several times and done shows, also done youth productions in the Fringe Festival in our teen component. The only one we don't have on board yet and I'm working on is a symphony, but maybe this will be the year to bring the symphony into the Fringe family. And family, we really consider that the Fringe is a community. It is an open, accessible community that is open to everyone who wants to present whatever work they want to present. So, for those who've not been to Fringe before, save the dates. The last 2 weeks of July, oh my gosh, and the dates just flew out of my head. I think it's the 17th through the 31st. Double check me on that, please. It's a Sunday through a Sunday, two full weeks. Hold on. And then we will run a virtual Fringe. We'll probably take a week break and get all the edits finished and then launch in early August, a virtual Fringe for a couple of weeks. And there's multiple ways to participate. You can support us. If you're interested, go to kcfringe.org. And we're also always looking for volunteers. Now, we've had 2 years without volunteer opportunities, so we're going to be rebooting all of that. And Craig, you can talk to Craig. He's been volunteering for a long time. Craig, I think maybe you've been volunteer since year one, if not.
No, 2009.
Okay, so not since 5, but early is. So you've been volunteering for a long time. So thank you, Renee. It is the 17th through the 31st. Yay! Thanks. Thanks for checking my dates. Excuse me. Opportunities to volunteer. And we have volunteer activities now that we're starting to come out of COVID. Before COVID, we had quarterly volunteer activities so we could continue building that community and getting to know each other better and just supporting each other in general. And then with our artists, we support them throughout the years as they have other productions. We encourage them to share their information with us so that we can share it with our Fringe audience, our greater Fringe audience, so that they can develop more followers, more audience. But again, you can go to kcfringe.org and there's information about supporting us in from volunteering and financially. So, or if you have any questions, there's a way there to ask more questions if we don't get your questions asked today. And we're in a big transition right now with COVID and realizing that, my tech needs are not what the future needs for this organization. And also, I've been doing this 17 years, going on 18 years. So we're right now in the search for my successor. But I'll be staying around for a few years and I will be focused on fundraising. I will become the development director once we hire a new ED, but I'll be around to help share all the history and all the stories and help get the new ED on track starting in early 2022. So with that, I will stop talking and see what questions we have.
What we'll do now is we'll take about a 4 to 5 minute break. And then we'll come back with questions. And during the break, You'll see the normal video, I think. Is that right, Renee? And this will be your opportunity during the break to help support the forum.
Thank you, Renee, or whomever is doing that.
Here we go.
All right.
Oh, sorry about that.
Thanks for attending today. The All Souls Forum is very important to our church. It provides us a chance to discuss the significant issues that impact our community. It's also important to me personally because I get to learn about the political issues that shape our world and ask questions of our speakers. From the attempted coup on the Capitol to recycling, we discuss all of the important issues. It costs about $100 a week to produce the forum. That's less than $5 a week per person watching on an average week. Andrea, can you show us how to support the UU Forum?
I'd be happy to, Richard. You can always send a check to the church. Be sure to put forum in the memo line. You'll find the address in chat, or you can find it on our website. To pay online, you can go to the All Souls website and click the big blue button, or click the link in chat. When you get to the giving page, enter the amount that you would like to give. On the next line, be sure to pick Give to Forum so that the money comes to support the forum. After that, you can choose how often you'd like to give. You can leave it at Give This One Time, or you can pick Give This Weekly, every 2 weeks, monthly, or yearly.
I like the idea of making a payment each month. It's just easier to budget.
I agree. That's what I usually do. After that, you can choose if you'd like to give with the debit card, credit card, or ACH bank transfer. The bank transfer will ask you to enter your numbers off of your check, and it will come directly out of your checking account. Once you've chosen that, pick Continue, enter the rest of your information. Feel free to add any comments you'd like. And if you'd like to cover the processing fee, you can click the button there and then click the Give bar.
Well, that seems easy enough. And let me take a moment to just say, hey, thanks to everyone making or planning on making a contribution. Now, Andrea, you keep mentioning that the links are in the chat. How do I see that?
If you're on a computer, it will open to the right of the video of the speaker without blocking anything. If you decide you're done, you can click the X at the top to close it, and that will not move you out of the meeting.
All right. So before we move on to the Q&A, can you please remind everyone how to virtually raise your hand?
Of course. Again, bring your mouse down to the bottom of your screen and look for the reactions button with the smiley face on it. Click it and then click anywhere on the raise hand bar. Zoom will put you in queue so that the moderator can call on you in the order your hand was raised. If you want to lower your hand, just repeat the steps and the bar will now have the lower hand option. If you'd like to see where you are in the queue, you can push the participants button and you will see this view showing you the order that you will be called on.
And for those of you on a phone, you can push *9.
Anything else I can show you guys today, Richard?
No, I think that covers it. It's time for questions.
Okay, and I'll get that link over into the chat now.
All right, so let me start with the question, Cheryl.
Okay.
One of the things that I look to the arts for is how it influences social policy. How does it influence attitudes in the community on social issues, whether it's abortion issue or gay rights or any of those related issues, also death penalty. And one of the things that there's been a major shift on is on death penalty. Um, we've got states every year or every couple years adding states that are getting rid of the death penalty. How do the arts influence those type of views?
A direct example. I'm drawing a blank on what year it was, but it's been maybe 8, 9 years ago. We had our first transgender shows, and we actually had 2 that year. One was a male transitioning to female, and the other was a female transitioning to male. Interesting audience response. People were like, I don't know that I want to see that. Volunteers were like, that's really not my cup of tea, but I know you need volunteers, so we'll cover those shifts. I still have people comment today that say, thank you for providing the opportunity for those shows to be seen. One of them I went, Rebecca Kling, an amazing artist out of Chicago, transitioning to female. And she was in the process. And so she was sharing her story. And she spoke for about 40, 45 minutes, and then her show ended. She said, okay, I'm going to step off stage and get a drink of water, and then I'm going to come back. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer your questions. It was a pretty full house. You guys, everybody got up and moved forward. They moved closer. No one left. There were dozens and dozens of questions, and Rebecca was so amazing in just saying, well, for me. And there were people that had, they had friends, had family, and they wanted to be sensitive. They wanted to be respectful, but they had questions and they didn't know how to ask those questions. And Rebecca just shared her perspective and said, just ask and ask if they're comfortable. And each time she did a Q&A after every single show, and every single time we had to move the Q&A out of the theater onto the street because people had so many questions. And this was a neutral party, not somebody that they personally knew that they would worry about insulting or hurting their feelings, but it was an artist that was putting themselves out there and gave people the opportunity to ask those questions. And many people, as I said, I still say thank you for providing that opportunity so that we had the opportunity to hear perspective and ask our questions and be more comfortable moving forward with our friends and loved ones. Yeah, putting it out there as we give our artists the opportunity to share their voice, their true voice. They can shape people's perceptions on all different social issues, and everybody has a different topic that is meaningful for them. So I always encourage audiences at our Fringe to step out of their comfort zone and see a show that they normally wouldn't see, so that perhaps they can get a new perspective on a relevant social subject that's occurring in our communities and get new perspective.
And what influence does that have on what happens in the political realm? Do you see the arts as moving public opinion enough to where that is resulting in changes in what happens in Congress, etc.?
Let me say, I would hope so. I don't have data that definitively supports that, but I think it's a beginning in affecting people's perceptions, and there can be a ripple effect. I know locally here in the arts community, just by being aware, I've had colleagues that made me aware, and now I make people that I know aware. If there's something happening in the community, show up at city council meetings. It's shocking. For me, it was shocking initially to find out that there's so few people who actually take an that actively engage and go to city council meetings, that when there were things happening years ago, like the I can't remember what it's called, in the crossroads, because property values were jumping so fast, and that's where so many artists were, and it was pushing them out, that they were setting up formulas to help keep artists in the crossroads district. Sorry, the terminology is not in my head right now, but going to those meetings and being present, and we were packing city council meetings, and they were going, okay, so which topic are you all here for? And then when the whole room was here for the arts taxation issue, then they're like, okay, we want to see a show of hands, who's in favor and who's opposed. That had a big impact, because they were being watched and being held accountable for their votes. So through the arts, we can encourage advocacy and hold our public officials accountable and respond to what our our needs are and our desires are. That help?
Okay, thank you for that. And who else has some questions?
Joe has his hand up, Craig.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, Cheryl. I got a question for you. Has over the years, has any performer or show like pushed it too far, or is that even possible? Or how do you? Are there some barriers, and how do you handle that?
They must be within the limits of the law, and so I frequently had to go to the city and say, "Hey, one year there was an artist who typically does Shakespeare and is amazing with Shakespeare, but this year his show title was Dancing Naked." And I'm like, red flag. Picked up the phone, called him and said, "Hey, Tim, your show title's Dancing Naked. Are you?" And he goes, "Oh yeah." And I went, "I got to find out if that's lawful or not." And it is. I was surprised. It is lawful as long as there are no live sex acts. But then the flip side of that is, in the early years, we had a couple of burlesque shows, and at one point we wanted to put them into one venue, so for continuity, but we could not, because if we did, then that would make that venue an adult entertainment venue that falls under state laws, and a whole different set of laws that we would have to comply with. But it was interesting, as long as we kept shows like that sandwiched between spoken word or music or theater, it was fine. We just couldn't put them in the same venue. So and fire, oh my gosh, in the very opening year, oh my goodness, opening year, second year, I can't remember, is it one of the first couple of years, we didn't have any criteria about fire in your performances. We didn't ask that question because we didn't know we needed to ask that question. And ironically, as we were dropping programs around, we dropped programs up off Independence Avenue, where the fire marshal is and the health department is, and where you get your liquor licenses, because that's where we had gotten our liquor license for our opening and closing party. So I dropped programs there, and fire marshal's office was going through there, and there was a burlesque show coming from St. Louis, and they were online looking at it, and they saw that this burlesque show utilizes fire in their act. We had no idea. We didn't ask that question. So the fire marshal's office showed up at that group's first performance and shut it down. So I got a call saying, "Come immediately." And it's like, I didn't know. So the next morning, we're all in the fire marshal's office at 8 a.m. figuring out what to do and how to manage this. And we had to pay a fire marshal to be there during their shows. And then we knew from that point on, you ask those questions. So every year we learn new lessons, things that we don't know, and we have to adapt and learn as we go. So now we ask that question up front. Do you have fire? Do you have this? Do you have that? You are responsible for the permits for that and for the requirements of those permits. Because if you have a fire performance indoors, then you have to pay someone from the fire marshals for a minimum hours and a minimum rate, which adds up quickly. So that's a long answer, but yeah, we don't know what we don't know, and we continue to learn and adapt as we go. And I see a question here from Dave Black. Hold on. Dave, and yes, Dave's been volunteering. Wait, hold on. Did I answer that question adequately? Maybe? Okay.
Thank you very much. I thought it was very good.
Okay. To tears. Wow, it was very powerful to see 3 decades. Dave, you want to expand on this?
I was, you're answering Craig's question about, because he brought up about the death penalty. I was bringing up an example of a fringe show. It wasn't about death penalty because New Orleans likes to have their free prison laborers. So they're not out to rush and kill people, but a man falsely accused and imprisoned for decades, and ultra powerful story.
Yeah.
It's a simple fringe show, just 3 small box stages. They permitted smoking in that one. They made an exception because he smoked in prison, and it was it was done in the back of a huge theater. So the show was actually shown on the stage. So everybody was in black box essentially, but it was very powerful.
Cool.
Hopefully it'll come here.
Thank you for sharing that, Dave.
Another topic that you had a very powerful play on was the teen suicide, which was 1 or 2 years before the pandemic hit.
Yeah. There have been some amazingly powerful shows. For me, that's why I continue to do this all these years, is walking out of a theater going, oh my God, I never thought about it that way before. And powerful impact our audiences, our artists can have on our understanding of other situations outside of our realm.
One of the things, as far as the type of theater arts, it seems like the most powerful plays seem to be the drama. Do you feel like the comedy shows also influence the community a lot?
I think they can, but also no. So with Fringe, you'll find everything from silly slapstick to heavy, deep drama. And everybody needs different things at different times. We all need to laugh occasionally. So those comedy shows provide a great relief, and especially when we're in extremely challenging times. And so I think it's a combination of all that is really the salve for our soul.
Okay, thanks. Are there some other questions? I don't see any other hands raised.
Well, for those, I know can't scroll through everybody, but I know Dave and excuse me, and Craig, what other shows have you seen that have been impactful for you?
Oh, wow. I have to describe them a little bit because I don't remember names of the plays at all.
Yeah.
One was a political play that took place in Missouri. And it was down, I think you had it, the Unicorn.
What was it about?
Oh, I'll have to try to remember.
But it was about politics, and it made an impact on you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, of course, the suicide show that I mentioned. I saw that transgender show that you mentioned. And
Rebecca went on to become in DC, advocating. What am I trying to say? She worked in DC advocating for transgender
Lobbying?
rights. Pardon?
Lobbyist?
Yes, she became a lobbyist.
Okay.
Sorry, I couldn't, it was not in my head. So Dave Black, I know you've traveled and been to many fringes across the world. What would you say your most transformative experience has been at a fringe show, and where?
I always favor social justice plays because I've been donating to social justice activism for decades. So I always appreciate when an artist can simplify a message and get a message through clearer. You were talking about transgender, but one of the best of venues here at Fringe was those teenagers who told their LGBT stories. So it was a combination of suicide, stress, repression, bullying, and that was a tearjerker. But my first answer when Cheryl asked the question, it was from the when I try to tell people the range of Fringe shows, I tell them about one of the first shows I saw in the first year's Fringe, Phantom of the Boog. It was a mime show. I've never seen a mime show. I thought I'd give it a chance. It was $5. The show starts with a guy picking his nose to the famous Phantom of the Opera music. And in short order, everyone from children to senior citizens are laughing. And you get that from Fringe.
Yeah, there are so many amazing artists and so much incredible talent. If you've not been to Fringe, I really encourage you to check it out. And also, Google, we have links on our site to US Fringe site. And most of us have pivoted, hate that word, but pivoted to digital components, and we'll continue those digital components. So you won't have to necessarily travel to see other Fringe shows. You will be able to go online ongoing and watch shows all over the US. And actually the World Fringe is working on a platform to do a network of Fringe shows worldwide. So they'll all be subtitled regardless of where you live and what language you speak, they'll be subtitled. So that should be coming in the next year or two.
I have a question for you, Cheryl. That's especially if you are moving into a development role. From the first Fringe, as a teenager, when I started my business, I got into licensure. And I'm hoping that Fringe Artist gets into licensure more. One of your main volunteers, Brian Colley, he's had several award-winning shows. I've chatted more than once with him about licensing his shows, because some of these shows are such wonderful message that I see it like a blooming flower that should be in 300 other cities.
Yes.
And as much as you're doing help with billeting and with technical side, I think the business side for artists to be able, because Brian did all that work producing those Best of Fest winning plays, that all he has to do is, there needs to be a separate team that markets and finds Fringe Fest people in Minneapolis, let's say, and can put on Khan and Hexing Hitler and other shows. And he doesn't have to travel. He can do it via Zoom. I believe there's a path for Fringe to get the message, more messages out into the world.
Yes. So Dave, let's have a conversation about doing a workshop for the artists, for the playwrights.
Your life, my life is not long enough to do all that needs to be done.
None of us are. There's so much to do. So yes, thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. And yes, let's work on a workshop. I think that's the best way to get the information out there.
The social justice issues too that I like so much with the Fringe. That's also why I love the plays at Unicorn. Is what Cynthia does is, I think almost every play it has something to do with the social justice issue.
It does. She's very attuned to that. It's wonderful.
Cheryl, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Have you seen every performance of Fringe since you've been involved? Or what percent would you say you have seen personally?
In the early years, nothing. I ran from problem to problem to problem as we were figuring things out and getting staffing up. And in the last several years, as we've gotten better staffed, I've been able to actually sit down and see shows. Oh my God, it's amazing. But no, it's absolutely impossible. We typically, if you go to every show slot that we have, because we'll run 15 to 18 venues simultaneously with 6 different shows in each venue. It's physically impossible to see all of those shows. You generally have anywhere from 75 to 100 different shows. and each of those shows do 5 performances. And so there's maybe 30 to 38 actual different time slots to see. So I think the most I've ever seen is 12 or 13 in any given year.
Mm.
So yeah, you don't know what is a don't miss until sometimes the festival is over and people are like, oh my God, that was the best show I've ever seen. Oh, but also, I love this. You know, almost every time I've gotten a complaint that, oh, that was the worst show I've ever seen. And if it were my first Fringe show, I would never come again. Every single time, I then ultimately have somebody else who says, wow, thank you for letting that show roll, because I learned something from it. So it is in the eye of the beholder. Everybody takes away different things. Okay. Any other questions?
Let's see. I don't see any hands. There's got to be more questions. Everybody ask a question.
Rita is waving her hand from her picture.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Rita, what's your question? You're on mute.
Thanks for being here. This is really goading me to get more active again. All I have, how does one gain access besides through the Unicorn Theater? What do I do to get access to these programs?
kcfringe.org, kcfringe.org, O-R-G. And you'll find our schedule there. Will we go back to printed programs? Who knows yet? Right now, the last couple of years with COVID, everything's been online, been digital, which can be intimidating for some, but we can help guide you through that process if you're not comfortable with that. We also have a Facebook page. I do Facebook, but I don't do all the others, Instagram and Snapchat, and I let the younger staff members handle all the social media. So we have all the different social media outlets that you can find the information about Fringe. There are volunteer opportunities. We email once you're in the volunteer loop. Craig and Dave can both tell you that we send out regular emails and keep volunteers up to date on what's going on. We also have a general email. People, just audience and artists and volunteers as a whole, we have a general e-blast that goes out, should go out regularly, gets out periodically with updates and what's going on. And yeah, and now that as we hopefully start coming out of COVID, hopefully, that we'll be able to start gathering more in person and then sharing more in person about what to do and how to do it and what opportunities are available. Does that help, Rita?
It helps a lot. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Hey, any other questions?
We'll save the date, July 17th through the 31st, and come check out Fringe. And watch the website, watch Facebook, and we'll be announcing in June, late June, who the artists are, what the schedules are, where everything will be taking place. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Cheryl.
I
Thank
have a possible question. Since there is quite a bit of social justice stuff with Fringe, how can we get, since All Souls has done like 8 that came out of California, how can we get some of these artists that have done their work and get them outside of the 2 weeks in Fringe, get them more exposure, and of course, get more exposure to that social justice message? If we can do something to have an ongoing series, particularly, I like the fun stuff too, but I especially like stuff that possibly can change the world. And All Souls has done that, where we've shown plays throughout the year or done staged readings, low cost, but we can get some revenue, more revenue for the artist and more advancement. So if that's something that's possible.
I love that idea and would love to work with you all and sharing with you those that are social justice issue based, and then letting you take it from there. Where there's a will, there's always a way.
Woohoo. Thank you.
Thank you.
And for those of us listening later, for listeners on KKFI, we have been talking to Cheryl Kimmi, who has just done the presentation at All Souls Forum. And we've been talking about the arts. She is the founder and executive director, or soon to be outgoing director of KC Fringe. And we've been talking about the impact that the arts have on the community and vice versa, the impact the community has on the arts. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. You all have a great holiday season.
And David and I need to get together so our dogs can have a play date. Wait.
All right, I'm going to end the recording.
Thank you again. It's been lovely.
Thank you all.